By the time the Korean Mafia boss realized the waitress was right, he had already lost $27 million. And the person who warned him was standing right in front of him, holding a tray. If you enjoy realistic, high-stakes stories where one conversation changes everything, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and stay with me. Because what happens next isn't about violence or fantasy. It's about power, money, pride, and a truth that hits too close to home. The laughter came first. Not loud, not careless. The kind of polite laughter men use when they're sitting across from someone who controls their future. The restaurant was private, expensive, and carefully chosen. No background music loud enough to interrupt conversations. No random guests wandering close. Everything about the place was designed to make important people feel untouchable. The boss leaned back in his chair, one arm resting loosely on the table, his expression bored. He'd already heard the numbers, already nodded at the projections, already been told what he expected to hear. Everything is stable. Everything is growing. Everything is under control. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, then noticed her. She wasn't doing anything wrong. That was the problem. Most servers moved quickly around his table. Eyes down, shoulders tense, trying to disappear. This one didn't rush, but she didn't linger either. Her movements were measured, calm, like someone who wasn't afraid of silence. He watched her for a moment longer than necessary. "Hey," he said casually, tapping the table once. She stopped, not frozen, just still. "Yes," she replied. The men at the table glanced at one another. Some smirked. Others leaned back, sensing entertainment. "You look smart," the boss said, half smiling. "Let me ask you something." She waited. "If you had my money," he continued, swirling the drink in his glass, "what would you do with it?" A few men chuckled. One shook his head, already amused. To them, this was nothing more than a rich man playing with a stranger's nerves. She was expected to laugh, or panic, or say something safe and meaningless. She didn't. She looked at him, then at the glass in her hand, as if considering whether to answer at all. That pause lasted less than 2 seconds, but it shifted the room. "I wouldn't invest it," she said. The laughter stopped so abruptly it felt physical. Someone cleared his throat. Another man shifted in his seat. The boss's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened, just slightly. "Oh," he said. "Then what would you do?" She exhaled quietly. "I'd stop the leak first." Silence. Not awkward silence. Alert silence. "A leak?" One of the men repeated with a nervous laugh. "That's funny." The boss didn't laugh. He leaned forward just enough for the light above the table to catch his eyes. "What leak?" he asked. She glanced at the phones on the table, at the watches, at the men themselves. "Your offshore accounts," she said. "The ones structured through 3 shells instead of 5. They're exposed." Someone scoffed. Another man shook his head. "That's impossible," one of them said. "Those accounts were reviewed last quarter." She nodded once. "That's when the siphoning started." The boss stared at her. "You're guessing," he said calmly. "No," she replied. "I saw the confirmation screens when you paid." That was when he sat up fully. The shift was subtle, but everyone felt it. "You work here," he said slowly. "How would you recognize a wire structure?" She hesitated, just enough to show she understood the danger she was in. "I used to audit corporate accounts," she said. "Multinational ones." One of the men laughed sharply. "Then why are you serving drinks?" She didn't look at him. "Because knowing the truth doesn't always pay," she said. "Sometimes it just keeps you alive." That line landed heavier than she intended. The boss raised a hand. The men stopped talking instantly. "Sit," he told her. The word hung in the air. That wasn't an invitation. It was a command. She placed the tray down slowly and took the seat opposite him. "Explain," he said. She didn't rush. "You're losing money in small, regular amounts," she said. "Too small to trigger alarms. Too consistent to notice without trend mapping." He slid his phone across the table. "Show me." She picked it up, careful not to touch anything she didn't need to. Her fingers moved confidently, not hurried, not shaky. She pulled up transaction histories, zoomed out, compared dates. This one, she said, pointing. And this, same routing pattern, different labels. That's not diversification. That's camouflage. The boss leaned closer. And this? He asked. She paused. That's where it gets personal, she said. She tapped the screen again. A name appeared. The man sitting to the boss's left stiffened. That's my CFO, the boss said quietly. Yes, she replied. And he's very good. That's why you didn't see it. The room felt colder. No one spoke. How much? The boss asked. She did the math quickly. Numbers didn't scare her. 27 million so far, she said. If it continues at the current rate, double that within the year. The boss leaned back. For a moment, everyone expected anger. It didn't come. Instead, he smiled. Interesting, he said. You know what that means? She met his gaze. That I won't be going back to serving tables. No, he said softly. It means you're now part of a problem. The words weren't threatening. They were factual. He dismissed the men with a gesture. Leave us. No one argued. When they were alone, he studied her again, this time without amusement. Why say anything? He asked. You could have laughed and walked away. She folded her hands in her lap. Because you were about to blame the wrong people, she said. And because systems like yours don't collapse loudly. They rot quietly. He nodded once. You're not afraid, he observed. I am, she said honestly. I'm just more afraid of pretending I didn't see it. He sat in silence for a long moment. Name, he said. She told him. Background. She gave him the short version. Finance degree. Corporate audits. Blacklisted after refusing to sign off on manipulated books. Moved cities. Took whatever job paid rent. No criminal past, she added. If that's what you're wondering. He almost smiled. Everyone here has a past, he said. The difference is who survives it. He stood. You're coming with me, he said. Not as staff. As a consultant. She didn't answer immediately. And if I say no? She asked. He looked at her calmly. Then you walk away, he said. And hope my CFO never realizes who noticed him first. That was the real threat. She stood. I'll come, she said. From that night on, nothing about his operation felt the same. She reviewed accounts, traced flows, identified inefficiencies no one else wanted to see. Not just theft, but arrogance. Money sitting idle. Risks masked by loyalty. She didn't flatter him. She didn't agree with him automatically. And she never raised her voice. That's what unsettled him most. One evening, weeks later, he asked her, Do you know why I trust you? She shook her head. Because you told me something that embarrassed me, he said. And you didn't enjoy it. She paused. And do you know why I stayed? She asked. He looked at her. Because you listened, she said. Most men with power don't. The CFO was removed quietly. No drama. No spectacle. Just absence. The leak stopped. The numbers stabilized. And the boss learned something he hadn't expected to learn from a waitress who was never supposed to matter. That intelligence doesn't announce itself. That truth often arrives disguised as disrespect. And that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimated. Because that conversation, the one that started as a joke, was the moment everything changed. The first change didn't announce itself. There was no celebration, no sudden shift in posture from the men around him. But within days, the room felt different. Meetings were shorter, fewer jokes, less noise. People spoke when spoken to, and when they did, they chose their words carefully. She noticed it before anyone else did. Power always reacts quietly when it's threatened. She worked from a small office near the back of the building. No windows, no sign on the door. Just a desk, a secure terminal, and stacks of printed statements most people would never understand even if they tried. She didn't ask for anything fancy. No assistant. No title. Just access. What surprised her wasn't how much money he had. It was how sloppy some of the systems were. Not because they were poorly designed, but because they were built on trust. Long-standing relationships, verbal assurances, men who had been around for years and assumed they always would be. Those assumptions were expensive. On the third night, she noticed something that hadn't come up before. Not theft this time. Risk. She brought it up carefully. "You're overexposed in logistics," she said, scrolling through a cluster of transactions. "Too many dependencies on the same ports." "They've worked for years," he replied. "Yes," she said. "That's why they're dangerous." He watched her quietly as she explained how disruption didn't come from strangers. Came from routines. From predictability. "You're not running a business," she said. "You're running a habit." He didn't interrupt her. That was new. Later that evening, after everyone else had left, he asked her something that had nothing to do with numbers. "Do you know why they resent you?" She looked up from the screen. "Because I replaced someone they trusted." He shook his head. "No," he said. "Because you weren't supposed to see any of this." She nodded slowly. "That's usually the reason." The resentment didn't stay hidden for long. It showed up in delayed files. Missing confirmations. Half-answers delivered with polite smiles. People stopped volunteering information. Not openly defiant, just subtly uncooperative. She expected it. What she didn't expect was how quickly it escalated. One afternoon, a report landed on her desk that didn't make sense. Numbers rounded too neatly, timing slightly off. It wasn't fraud. It was misdirection. She cross-checked it with another source. Then a third. By evening, she was certain. Someone was feeding her curated data. She didn't confront anyone directly. She never did. Instead, she rebuilt the report from raw logs and took it to him herself. He read it in silence. "They're testing you," he said. "No," she replied. "They're testing you." That was the moment he realized the problem wasn't just financial anymore. It was cultural. He had built loyalty through proximity, not accountability. People had learned how to survive near him by being useful, agreeable, and invisible. She disrupted that balance simply by asking questions that had answers. "You want me to remove them?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "You want to know who adapts and who panics." He smiled faintly. "You think like someone who's been cornered before." She didn't deny it. Over the next 2 weeks, pressure increased. Deadlines tightened. Oversight doubled. She introduced redundancy into systems that had never been questioned. Every move was defensible, logical, and exhausting. That was the point. Some people adjusted. Others didn't. One senior manager began missing meetings. Another started making careless errors. The same names kept surfacing around the same weak points. Patterns always told the truth. Late one night, as she was packing up, she noticed a man lingering near the hallway. He wasn't supposed to be there. She'd seen him before, security adjacent, always quiet. "You should be careful," he said, not meeting her eyes. "About what?" she asked. "About being right," he replied. She considered him for a moment. "Being wrong is usually more dangerous," she said, and walked past him. She told the boss the next morning. He listened, then nodded. "They're starting to feel the walls," he said. "What happens when they do?" she asked. "They push," he replied. "Or they run. Either way," she said, "you learn who they are." The push came sooner than expected. A rumor surfaced, not loud, just persistent, that she was manipulating numbers to inflate her importance, that she was exaggerating risks to secure her position, that she had connections elsewhere, that she was planting doubt. None of it was provable. That's what made it effective. He called her in that evening. "They're turning the room against you," he said. She sat down. "Only if the room was never mine to begin with," she replied. He studied her. "You're not angry." "No," she said. "This is predictable." "How?" he asked. "Because the truth doesn't threaten people," she said. "Exposure does." He leaned back. "What do you want me to do?" She thought for a moment. "Nothing," she said. "Let them talk." That answer surprised him. You're sure? They'll overplay it, she said. They always do. She was right. 2 days later, someone made a move too big to hide. A rush transfer, poorly masked, clearly designed to frame her review process as flawed. She caught it within minutes. This time, she didn't bring it to him. She let it sit. She let the transfer clear. She let the damage register. Then she walked into his office and placed the full timeline on his desk. They crossed the line, she said. Now it's your turn. He read it slowly. This time his anger didn't stay quiet. But even then, there was no spectacle, no shouting, no confrontation, just decisions. People were reassigned, access revoked, roles dissolved. No announcements, no explanations, just absence. The building exhaled. In the weeks that followed, things stabilized in ways even she hadn't anticipated. Not because fear increased, but because clarity did. People knew what was expected. They knew what would be checked. They knew silence wouldn't save them. One evening, as they reviewed the final quarter's recovery numbers, he closed the file and looked at her. You know, he said, I asked you that night as a joke. I know, she replied. And yet, he continued, you gave me the most expensive answer I've ever received. She smiled faintly. Truth usually is. He stood and walked to the window. You could have taken this skill anywhere, he said. A legitimate firm. A clean life. She joined him. I tried, she said. They didn't want honesty. They wanted confirmation. He nodded. So did I, he admitted. Until it embarrassed me. They stood in silence for a moment. You're leaving eventually, he said. Yes, she replied. I always was. When it stops making sense to stay. He accepted that. That was another thing that made her dangerous. She didn't need him. Months later, when she finally resigned, there was no argument. No attempt to stop her. Just a signed transfer, a clean exit, and a quiet understanding. On her last day, he said something she hadn't expected. You changed the way I listen, he said. That may cost me more than money. She nodded. Or save you more than you realize, she replied. She walked out the same way she'd walked in months earlier. Calm, unannounced, unassumed. And long after she was gone, the lesson remained. Power isn't threatened by noise. It's threatened by clarity. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in a room full of powerful people is answer a joke honestly. What would you do if the moment that proved your worth also painted a target on your back? If the story is pulling you in, take a second to like the video and stay with me, because what unfolds next isn't dramatic fiction. It's the quiet, realistic aftermath of power being challenged, egos being bruised, and consequences that don't disappear just because the numbers improve. When she left, the office didn't feel empty. That surprised him. He had expected some sense of relief, closure, maybe. Instead, there was a subtle imbalance in the air, like a room after a machine shuts off and the silence feels louder than the noise ever was. The reports were still clean. The system still worked. The money was still moving where it should. Yet something essential was missing. Clarity had a voice now, and that voice was gone. First, nothing changed. That was the problem. People reverted to old habits faster than he expected. Not openly, not recklessly, just enough to test whether the rules still mattered. Questions were delayed. Oversight softened. The room grew comfortable again. Comfort had always been the enemy. He noticed it during a routine review when someone said, "It's probably fine," and no one challenged it. That sentence bothered him more than any missing figure ever had. He dismissed the team early that night and stayed behind alone, scrolling through the same dashboards she had built. They were efficient, unforgiving, designed to show trends instead of excuses. She had never designed them to need her. That, more than anything, told him who she was. A week later, a minor discrepancy surfaced. Small enough that the old version of him would have ignored it. A rounding error. A timing issue. Nothing urgent. This time he didn't. He followed the trail himself. It led nowhere alarming, but it led somewhere familiar. A name. Not someone new. Not someone reckless. Someone dependable. the kind of person systems are built around. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. This was the part she never stayed for. The part where correction became uncomfortable. He called the man in. There was no accusation, no raised voice, just a question. Walk me through this. The explanation was smooth, confident, plausible, too plausible. He asked another question, then another. The answers remained calm, but the spacing between them changed. Half seconds, micro-hesitations, the kind only someone listening carefully would catch. He dismissed the man with a nod. Later that night he sent one message. Begin a full review. The reply came quickly. Of which segment? All of it. That decision cost him time, goodwill, and a quiet resistance that spread faster than he'd expected. People didn't like uncertainty. They liked predictability even if it was flawed. The review uncovered nothing criminal. That too was the problem. It revealed inefficiencies, laziness disguised as experience, blind spots justified by seniority, the same rot she had warned him about. Without her presence, people felt safer pushing back. She's gone, one executive said during a closed-door discussion. We don't need to overcorrect. He looked at the man for a long moment. No, he replied. We need to finish. That was when he understood the cost of growth. It wasn't loss. It wasn't risk. It was loneliness. Leadership, real leadership, narrowed the room. Months passed. The operation stabilized again, but on different terms. Fewer assumptions, fewer shortcuts, more friction, more arguments, less comfort. He became quieter, not withdrawn, focused. He asked better questions, shorter ones. He waited longer before responding. People noticed. They adjusted. Some left voluntarily. Others stayed but recalibrated. The culture shifted slowly, painfully, and for the first time in years, intentionally. One evening, long after the building had emptied, he opened an old file he hadn't touched since her departure. Her original assessment. He reread the first line. You're not running a system. You're running trust. He closed the file and stared at the ceiling. Trust had limits. She had shown him where his were. Across the city, her life had changed too. Just not in the way people assumed. She didn't step into a glamorous role or headline a firm. She didn't cash in on proximity to power. She moved quietly, deliberately, consulting where she could, refusing roles that wanted silence more than truth. Word spread anyway, not loudly, carefully. She asks uncomfortable questions. She doesn't bluff. She doesn't stay long. Those became her reputation. One afternoon, a former colleague asked her why she walked away from the most powerful position she'd ever had. She answered honestly, because staying would have meant becoming what I was fixing. That answer cost her opportunities. It also saved her something she valued more: time. Months later, she received a message she didn't expect. No sender name, no greeting, just a single line. You were right again. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back. About what? The reply came slower this time. About how power resists change. She didn't smile. That wasn't a victory. She wrote one last message. Only when it forgets why it exists. She didn't hear from him again after that. But she didn't need to. The impact of that one conversation, the joke that wasn't meant to be answered, continued to ripple outward in ways neither of them could fully control. He became more selective, less theatrical, more precise. She became more distant from power and more influential in quieter spaces. Neither of them became softer. They became clearer. Years later, a young analyst would ask him during a private meeting, "What was the moment you realized you didn't know everything?" He thought about it longer than the question deserved. Then he said, "When someone with nothing to gain told me the truth." The analyst nodded, unsure what to do with that answer. That was fine. Not every lesson was meant to be absorbed immediately. Some were meant to linger, because the truth this story leaves behind isn't dramatic. It's unsettling. That intelligence doesn't always announce itself with credentials. That power often hides behind jokes. and that the most dangerous shift in any room happens when someone underestimated decides to speak anyway. So the real question isn't what she said. It's this: if you were standing where she stood, and you knew the truth, would you have answered the joke? What happens when the truth doesn't just change the room, but starts changing the people who survived it? If you're still here, stay with me, because this is where consequences stop being abstract and start becoming personal. The first real consequence didn't show up in the numbers. It showed up in the silence. People stopped volunteering ideas. Meetings grew cautious. Conversations ended faster than they used to. No one wanted to be the next person whose routine was examined too closely. Efficiency improved. Trust did not. He noticed it one morning when a senior manager hesitated before answering a simple question. The man eventually spoke, but his voice carried something new: calculation. Fear wasn't loud. It never was. It was careful. That realization unsettled him more than any loss ever had. He had corrected the system, but in doing so, he'd removed something else: the illusion that longevity meant safety. People were no longer relaxed around him. They were alert. And alert people make fewer mistakes, but they also stop taking responsibility. Problems began to travel upward instead of being solved where they appeared. Minor decisions waited for approval. Small risks froze entire departments. Control increased. Momentum slowed. One evening, after dismissing another meeting early, he stayed behind and stared at the city through the glass. The lights looked orderly from a distance. Predictable. Clean. Up close, he knew better. That's when it hit him. She hadn't just fixed his finances. She had changed the cost of leadership. Before, loyalty had been emotional. Now it was contractual. And contracts break differently. The second consequence arrived weeks later, wrapped in success. A new partner approached, one he'd wanted access to for years. The deal was clean, profitable, and strategically perfect. The room buzzed with restrained excitement. Everyone agreed. That should have worried him. He asked one question: what happens if we're wrong? The room stalled. Someone gave a careful answer. Another added reassurance. Data was presented. Slides clicked forward. It all looked solid. And yet, something felt familiar. The absence of friction. He paused the presentation. Who disagrees? He asked. No one spoke. That silence cost him the deal. He walked away, not because it was bad, but because no one had challenged it hard enough. The backlash was immediate. Frustration, confusion, quiet resentment. People wanted certainty back. Later that night, alone in his office, he admitted something he hadn't said out loud before. Truth had made him safer. It had also made him isolated. Across the city, she was facing consequences of her own. Her reputation had grown sharper, cleaner, more dangerous. She was brought into rooms where everyone already suspected something was wrong, but no one wanted to say it. She would listen, ask 3 questions, and leave behind discomfort that couldn't be ignored. She was paid well for short bursts of clarity, but she wasn't invited back. "You make people nervous," one executive told her bluntly. "That's not my goal," she replied. "It's the side effect." Opportunities narrowed. Not because she wasn't competent, but because she refused to soften conclusions to preserve relationships. She could feel the ceiling lowering. Then came the moment she didn't expect. A former associate reached out, someone from before, someone she trusted. "I need help," the message read. Quietly, they met in a neutral place. No tension, no drama. The issue wasn't theft. It was pressure. He was being pushed to approve decisions he didn't believe in. Not illegal, just reckless. The kind that ruined careers slowly. "I thought of you," he said, "because you don't lie to make things easier." She listened, reviewed, asked questions. Then she gave him the truth. "You already know the answer," she said. "You just want permission to act on it." He nodded. "Will it cost me?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Then it's already costing you," he said quietly. That conversation ended a partnership, protected a team, and left her name circulating again, this time with a warning attached. "She's effective, but she won't protect you." Back at the operation, the hardest consequence arrived without announcement. A trusted figure resigned. No scandal, no confrontation, just a clean exit and a vague explanation about changing priorities. The loss rippled deeper than expected. This wasn't corruption being removed. This was loyalty choosing distance. He realized then that not everyone wanted a cleaner system. Some wanted a familiar one, even if it leaked. That night, he opened a file he hadn't touched in months. Her final notes. Not financial this time. Cultural. People don't fear consequences, she'd written. They fear unpredictability. He closed the file. He had made things unpredictable. Necessary but costly. The next months tested him more than the years before ever had. He had fewer allies. Fewer unquestioned agreements. More resistance dressed up as professionalism. And yet, the numbers held. The system didn't rot. He slept better. That contradiction haunted him. One evening, he asked himself a question he'd avoided since the beginning. If she walked back into this room now, would she approve of what I've become? He didn't know. And that uncertainty, that unresolved tension, was the hardest consequence of all. Because the truth, once spoken, doesn't just change outcomes. It changes standards. And once standards rise, everything that fails to meet them starts to hurt more. Before we go any further, take a second to pause. If the story feels uncomfortably real, if you've ever watched honesty change a room, or punish the person who spoke it, like the video and stay with me. This part isn't about plot anymore. It's about consequences most people pretend don't exist. The hardest lessons don't arrive loudly. They arrive disguised as improvement. From the outside, everything looked better. Reports were cleaner, profits steadier, risk tighter. Anyone glancing at the surface would say the operation had matured. Inside, it felt heavier. Decisions took longer because no one wanted to be wrong. Conversations were polite but guarded. People spoke in layers, what they meant buried under what was safe. Truth had raised the standard. And standards always reveal who was coasting. He saw it in meetings where capable people deferred instead of leading. In emails rewritten 3 times to remove accountability. In eyes that watched him too closely, measuring every reaction. Fear had replaced assumption. That wasn't strength. It was pressure. He finally understood something she had tried to explain without saying it outright. When you remove illusions, you don't just expose weakness. You expose people's dependence on comfort. Some adapt. Some retreat. Some quietly look for exits. Leadership, he learned, doesn't just create loyalty. It selects for tolerance. And not everyone can tolerate clarity. One night, long after everyone else had left, he stood alone in the boardroom and asked himself a question no one else could answer for him. Had he created a better system? Or just a colder one? The numbers said better. The room said colder. Across the city, her lessons were landing just as hard. She'd stopped taking certain calls. Not because she didn't need the work, but because she recognized patterns faster now. Organizations that wanted reassurance instead of truth. Leaders who asked questions hoping for validation, not answers. She turned them down politely. That choice cost her income. It also preserved something else. Integrity isn't dramatic. It's expensive. She noticed how often people asked for guidance when what they really wanted was cover. How frequently honesty was welcomed until it required action. You're right, they'd say. Then do nothing. That realization hardened her. Not into bitterness, but into precision. She became selective with her words. Shorter, sharper, delivered only when necessary. And when she spoke, she accepted the fallout without chasing approval. That was another lesson power rarely teaches you until it's too late. If you tell the truth, you have to be willing to lose the room. Back at the operation, the mirror turned inward. A senior leader challenged him openly for the first time in years. Not disrespectfully, strategically. This level of scrutiny is slowing us down, the man said. We're losing momentum. He didn't respond immediately. Momentum had once blinded him. What's slowing us, he replied calmly, is adjustment. The answer didn't satisfy everyone. And that was the point. He realized then that leadership after truth is different from leadership before it. Before, people follow vision. After, they follow conviction. Conviction demands consistency, and consistency costs energy. Some nights, he wondered if it would have been easier to laugh off her comment and walk away that first evening. To stay comfortably unaware. To let the leak continue quietly. Plenty of people live that way. He didn't anymore. She faced her own reckoning months later when an opportunity finally arrived that tested everything she claimed to believe. A role with influence, security, visibility, and conditions. Nothing illegal, nothing explicit, just a quiet expectation to soften conclusions, to phrase things gently, to protect certain people from uncomfortable exposure. She read the offer twice, then declined. The response came quickly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." She replied with one sentence. Harder isn't the same as wrong. That decision closed doors she knew wouldn't reopen. It also confirmed something she'd suspected all along. Truth doesn't climb ladders easily. Clears rooms. The lesson both of them learned, separately painfully, was the same. Honesty isn't rewarded the way people say it is. It's tolerated until it becomes inconvenient. Then it's tested. And when it survives the test, it changes you. Not into a hero. Into someone who can no longer pretend. The joke that night had been harmless. Casual. Forgettable. The answer wasn't. It exposed how fragile systems built on assumption really are. How easily power confuses silence for loyalty. How often intelligence is ignored until it becomes undeniable. And how quickly truth reshapes the lives of everyone it touches. So here's the real question, the one this story keeps circling but never answers for you. If you were in that room, if you saw the leak, if you knew the truth would cost you comfort, safety, or opportunity, would you still say it? Or would you laugh, walk away, and let the system keep bleeding? If the story made you think, like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want the next chapter, because the next consequence isn't financial. It's personal.